Welcome to today's Seidokan Saturday. 7th kyu, blue belt with a stripe continuing. Now we look at the kata, Pinan Shodan. I went into a rather lengthy diatribe on the Pinan Nidan video about Pinan Nidan, Pinan Shodan, why it means two and one, but I teach it as first and second rather than Shodan first, then Nidan, and the name change from Japan and the simplicity versus complexity of the kata as they progress, and teaching taxonomy where you start with simplest to hardest. Pinan Nidan is easier, Pinan Shodan is a little more complex. In reference to that, Funakoshi, when he changed to the kata name to Heian, changed the sequence as well from 2 to 1 and 1 to 2. Anyway, so that's a whole history thing. Secondly, before we begin the kata, there are some familiar-ish positions. This position, for example, which we see in Seisan, in Anaku, we now see in Pinan Shodan. But how we get there is different. So not just where the hands finish matters, but, and I've addressed this before, the line of movement, the trajectory. In Pinan Shodan, they come up. In Seisan, they come across. Why? Well, if you watch what my feet just did, if I'm in a neko ashirachi, if I'm in cat stance, and I swing, there's really nothing stop. This foot is very lightly on the ground. It's not enough to stop a powerful throw in this direction. But if I follow through to its natural progression, as I throw, I would settle myself. And so this position on the left side in Seisan, on the right side in Anaku, braces us against a nice, strong, angular movement. So my hands are moving this way, as opposed to Pinan Shodan, where they're moving completely vertically because I'm not set up to brace against a lateral directional movement. So that's one difference. We also see this in our kama form, much later in our sequence of kata. From our yoi or ready position, the right hand slightly comes down, pulls and blocks up, which would be cutting against a staff, a bow, or a sword, as the left strikes forward. Just put a hole in my bag. These are dull, that should not have happened. But the direction of the movement is up, forward, as opposed to, but again, it's all on the line with my neko ashirachi, as opposed to up and rising. So I'm not hitting forward with this left hand like I do with the kama, okay, or this side if I'm doing this way. So I'm not hitting forward with this hand, I'm hitting upward with this hand, and this can be this position or here, depending on if I'm thinking of it as a last minute twist for a block or as a rising urazuki uppercut, whether I'm thinking of this as a block or as a forward punch, which we've talked about before. So little variations in movement, direction matter, okay? So sequence name from Funakoshi in Japan to Seidokan, to how I teach the sequence, to what the names actually are, 2 and 1 versus 1 and 2. Issue number 1, direction, line of movement is number 2. I can get my hands to here just by pushing forward. That's vastly different than moving on a horizontal plane in an arcing motion to throw the move, as opposed to a pushing or driving motion. Did a whole seminar on the differences in the different shitoke knife hand block positions. So not everything, though it ends up looking the same at the end point, not everything is the same because of how it gets to that end point, okay? It matters whether I take the zigzag trail up to the top of the mountain or whether I try to climb straight up to the peak or whether I circle around the entire mountain to get to the top. I'm going to get to the top regardless. How I get there matters. And in karate terms, it matters because of how we apply the technique, what the application is. In Seisan, again, for example, we're grabbing what would essentially be the wrist and the elbow, or the elbow and the shoulder, forearm and biceps, somewhere on 2 points on the arm as we pull. But if I have the wrist and the elbow, as I go here, now I have this bending of the arm Tweety position, which leads very nicely to crossing over, pushing his wrist over his elbow, and then turning to throw and or break and a variety of other things. So that movement here, what Jody Paul used to say, like to call, throw the bucket of water out the window, okay, is the direction of movement, as opposed to rising, which is a very different type of application to the movement. We're doing that stepping to the side also. So I'm not going straight at the guy necessarily. I'm coming off to the side as I make that move. Last note before I get on with kata, Seidokan does several things that a lot of the more modern versions, or no other version does in some cases. We have in the Pasai Sho kata, we have a block and front kick. This is very much the old school because this is a close range. I'm only reaching here. My front kick may be to the groin or to the leg. Then we get the back fist and front kick, and the kick is going up higher, and we're reaching farther away. And the most modern version, which you'll see again in Shodokan and even has been adopted by some of our Seidokan people, I think Tamai sometimes does it this way himself, is back fist and a side thrust kick, which is even longer range. So we've gone from a fairly close range to a very long range situation. Our Pinan Shodan typically is done with the back fist and the front kick, which is kind of the middle between the long and the short. Reason being, and again you can go back to other videos I've done on this, that combatively range matters. And in fact, just a couple of videos ago on the kick-punch combinations, I talked about being able to set and know that my back leg can reach, but my punch and my front leg can't. With a slight move forward, my front leg can reach, and both hands can. With a slight move forward, my back knee can reach, not the front one, and short punches, possibly leaning into elbows. With a little bit closer, then we're grappling, holding, head-butting, all knees, short kicks into the legs, and throws and so forth. So the range is specific to the movement. Shorter range, longer range, longest range. Very different in application. Shorter, closer is much more old school Okinawan karate focused on self-defense. Longer, farther, is typically more focused on sport. Somewhere in the middle, you make your own applications. So we do it sort of in the middle range, as at least as I was taught through Sensei Paul from Master Toma, and as I've seen it performed in Toma's dojo numerous times on video, although I never had the pleasure of actually visiting him in his dojo in Okinawa. But that's how we did it when he came to the States and we did it. So, that aside, a couple of other little differences. In our Pinan Nidan, there are some additional strike follow-ups, which in most other Pinan Nidan Okinawan systems don't have. After our Morotuke here, we do a double punch. After our low block, high block here, we add strikes. And even in Seidokan there again, let me switch feet so you can see a different angle. From our high block, some come all the way back. But if I've blocked something up here, and he's retracting his hand, so he's punched me, and he's going to punch and pull back. If I block and pull back, now we're back to neutral. I've gained no ground. Kata wants me to gain ground. So I high block, and as his hand pulls back, I follow it. Do a short setup strike to his ribs, either as a hammer or a straight punch. And if I do this here, it really could be either one. Then I follow up with my power techniques. This also, by following his punch as it comes back, I block, I follow his punch. Returning allows me to grab and then grab again, so I have control using my hikite to pull him in. A lot of little differences there. And then we finish with our low block to the front, cat stance and knife hand block. All of those additional movements are exclusive to Seidokan, at least insofar as I've seen anywhere else in the Okinawan Japanese karate world. So those are some variations to look for. I think that's all of the little distinctions I wanted to make. So without further ado, Pinan Shodan. I'll do it once from this angle and then once from not my best side, but just so you can see the returning movements. Hey. Pinan Shodan. And now from the other side. Maybe too close here. Pinan Shodan. And there you have it. So there may be slight, I'm going to call them quirks, little differences in angle, hand positions, but the general framework, that's our Seidokan Pinan Shodan as I do it here. Questions, good jokes, like, share, subscribe, ask a question, make fun of me, whatever you got to do. But hopefully it was helpful and instructive. So until next week, as always, as will I, keep practicing.